Thank you for joining me on this free webinar on how you can unleash the power of story and build your brand in order that you would connect authentically with the people that you most want to reach and serve. My name is David Welde, and I'm the president of Higher Life Publishing and Marketing. Higher Life is a rather unique organization. We exist to help our clients experience the thrill of making a difference, and we do that by helping them discover and share their story. You know, since the beginning of time, humans have used story to make authentic connections. Long before there was parchment or printing presses or even the internet, there was story. Stories were used to pass on information, to pass on legacy, to pass on values from one generation to the next. And so there's something mystically wonderful about the power of story that works, and I want to share that with you. Because to the extent that you can harness this power of story, you can make those authentic connections that will help you grow your business. It doesn't matter whether you're a professional, maybe you're a certified financial planner, a CPA, a motivational speaker, a counselor, or a coach. Maybe you're a pastor of a church. Maybe you're the executive director of a nonprofit organization. No matter what organization you work for or the sphere of business that you're in, there's something about the power of story that will work for you, and I'd love to show you how. Recently, I did a seminar for a local chamber of commerce where we took some time to work on this power of story, and this is the substance of this webinar that you're about to experience. Of course, at any point along the way, make notes that you want to ask because I want to be available to answer your questions. Now let's strap in and get ready to go as you discover the power of story to connect with your audience. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Let's talk about how to stand out and grow your business. What we're going to do specifically is talk about how to unleash the power of story, your story, and build your brand so that you make authentic connections, connections that attract more people to you and help you keep the people that you attract. Because at the end of the day, we all are here to serve. We all have people that we want to help. And you know what? Today, we actually have an advantage because it used to be that businesses had fairly limited choices of how they could promote their services or the things that they offered, the things that they made. Maybe the local newspaper. I don't know about you, but I used to live up in the Midwest, and my parents would bring us down to Florida on summer vacation, and we would always pass the Sea Rock City signs where they were painted on the tops of the barns, and that was a rather innovative way to market your business. But there just weren't that many options. But that's not how it is today. Now we have more choices than ever before. We've got direct mail, we've got video, we've got audio, we've got not just stations and cable, but now we have streaming services. And now, oh my gosh, there's this thing, maybe you've paid attention, it's called the internet. So we've got the internet, and there's blogging and social media and email marketing. Heck, we've got skywriting and affinity marketing and cause marketing. It's endless, the ways that you can get your message out. So it's never been easier to get your message out in front of people. There's more, and frankly, it's never been cheaper. And yet, businesses still struggle. Here's why. While it's easy to get your message out there, it seems like it's harder than it's ever been before to stand out. How do you get your message noticed? Because with all of the plethora of ways that we can communicate our message, share our values, everybody else is swimming in the same pond too. And so it becomes harder and harder to stand out. I publish books for authors, and everybody wants to get on Amazon. Great, it's easy to get on Amazon. You and 14 plus million other authors. So, you know, Kevin Costner had a famous line in the movie Field of Dreams that said, if you build it, they will come. I find that authors' corollary to that is if I publish it, people will buy it. That's just not true anymore. Because just because you say it, you share it, just because you have value to offer, doesn't mean it's going to reach the people that you want to serve. So today, what I want to do is share with you some cues, some little bit off the beaten path, but powerful methods how you can break through the noise. That's the goal. How do you break through the noise, break through the clutter so that your value, your message actually gets heard, you get paid attention to, and that you connect with the audience that you most want to serve? So, it's incredibly important to differentiate ourselves. You know, there are 6.5 million new businesses started up every single year. And as you've probably heard, 80% of those go out of business in the first year and a half. And what I found out recently is, you know what? 80% of those that survive the first year and a half fail over the next 5 years. So the odds are not particularly good. Do you know that there are 5,000 advertising impressions, and this data is a little bit old, so it's probably up from there, that you're bombarded with every single day? How are you going to break through that noise? How are you going to break through that clutter? It isn't about spending the most money. Do you know that one of the most expensive forms of advertising, everybody's heard of it, is advertising on the Super Bowl? 30-second commercial on the Super Bowl was $1 million plus this past Super Bowl season, and yet only 1 in 5 Super Bowl ads actually leads to a purchase. That's a pretty expensive thing. So I guess my question to you is your marketing working? Are you connecting the dots? You know, Henry Ford made a famous quote. He said, you know, I know half my advertising isn't working. I just don't know which half. And so what I want to share with you today is some ways to break through, because spending money isn't the answer. Look at some of these bloopers here. I mean, these are actual ads that people hired agencies to actually spend the money. Here's ad on one side that says, oh my gosh, my sister accidentally killed herself. And then the next hair care product right next door to that is, oops, bad timing. How about this one? Just doesn't really play too well. Not good. I'm sure Boeing wouldn't care for this one at all. This one was classic. The social media ad that popped up on Google was advertising for a cruise and was advertising over the news feed showing that cruise ship on its side. Not what I love this one here. 2 billboards right next to each other. 1 in 3 people in Louisiana will die from heart disease. And right next door to it, 2 for $3, Chris sandwich. So here's the challenge that we face. People that you want to read have 4 things going on. Number 1, they're distracted. They're overwhelmed. All of us have got too much on our plate. We are guilty of we're too busy between soccer games and extra meetings. People have never been working harder. Our standard of living may be up, but people are pulled in way too many directions. And so you're very aware of your message, you're very aware of your value, and you desperately want to connect the dots for the people that you want to serve. And they would be helped, but they're distracted. How do you break through that distraction? Here's the other thing. With so much advertising, people get cynical. They're skeptical. It's easier to assume it's not true than that it is true. And people have taken on a bit of a glass half empty rather than a glass half full mentality. So you've got to connect with them in a way that deals with that skepticism. The third issue is inertia. When in doubt, stay the course. Do what I'm doing. So it's easier for me, if I've not bought your product or service, no matter how wonderful it is, you've got to get me past the inertia of my familiarity. It's always easier to say no than to say yes, because no maintains the status quo. That's what I've been doing, and it's just as easy for me to maintain my status quo than to have to make the transition to do something. So you've got to be compelling enough. You've got to be interesting enough. You've got to make me curious enough that you will move me past that built-in inertia that makes me want to homeostasis, keep the status quo. And the last thing is with all of this overstimulation, we've become desensitized. We deal with that in parenting issues all the time. It's like our kids have been so desensitized to real human trauma that human trauma doesn't grab them anymore. And that happens in life. So, and it's the same way in marketing, that people get desensitized. So what I want to share with you are a couple of very strategic ways that you can combat these things. And it's through the power of your story and the authentic development of your brand. So let's look just real briefly at each of these areas. How do you beat distraction? Well, one of the things is you have to be really good, really clear about conveying the benefit that you have to offer. Don't make people guess. I find so often in marketing that the copy is telling me all about what the product does. Nobody cares what your product does. So if you're selling a vacuum cleaner, you can go on and on about how amazingly this vacuum sucks up dirt. Nobody cares. What they do care about is how much time you've saved them, how clean their carpets are going to look when their friends come over. So what you need to do is shift from talking about what your product or service does to shifting into how it will benefit me, how it will help me as a client live better, feel better, think better. Secondly, you've got to be out there over and over. You know, say in marketing, it takes 7 times to make an impression before it's retained. I found even in listening to, as we were going through sharing each other's names, in my head I was repeating everybody's names because maybe it's just age, but I can hear your name once, twice, 3 times, and 5 seconds later, and I'm determined I'm going to remember it, it's gone. So we have to do some things to be consistent. Better to be consistent in a few channels than to spread yourself too thin. Third thing you want to do is try to be distinct and catch people when they're not looking. Look for unique ways to stand out that, oh, I wasn't looking for that. Sometimes I think that's where affinity marketing, or even like if you might be selling insurance, but if you show up sponsoring a luncheon at a softball game or a function, there are some different things that you can do to catch people when they're not looking. How do you deal with skepticism? Well, I think one of the greatest ways to do that is to share testimonials. I don't know about you, but when my wife goes to buy something, let's say she was, I think, recently looking to buy one of those digital picture frames, she never once researched or looked up the specifications. She didn't know anything about the pixels or the refresh rate or any of those things. What did she do? She went right to the reviews because she wanted to read what other people said about that product. Reviews are nothing other than testimonials. So what can you do to share reviews, testimonials that validate not from you as the owner of the product or the service, but other clients? What they have to say about your service carries more weight than what you have to say. The second thing I want to encourage you to do is be authentic. People like kids can snuff out a lack of authenticity. If you're just putting on a show, if you're just schmoozing, if in your heart and mind these are the claims that you're holding to, but your brand isn't authentically living up to that, that's a recipe for disaster. Because you might say we're customer friendly, but if the experience doesn't line up with what you say, you lose credibility. So and again, people are coming in already somewhat skeptical. So by you keeping your word, simple things, even showing up on time for a meeting, keeping your word, you're building authenticity. Third thing, and this ties in so closely to the power of story, is be relatable. Especially in dealing with millennials. Boomers, they want to know that you're the expert, that you've figured it all out, and I'll pay money to listen to the guy that I think has figured it all out. With millennials, they want to know that you can identify with their dysfunction, with their brokenness, with their woundedness first, before they'll listen to what you have to say. So while, yes, it's good if you've got it all figured out, but until you can connect the dots with them, that they know that you can identify with their pain points, with their issues, they want you to drink beer with them. They want you to know that you can identify with where they're coming from before they'll listen to you. It's a difference. And so you need to think in terms of your marketing of not only how well are you conveying your expertise, but how well are you relating to your clients. Sometimes the authors who have the most challenging story go the farthest. So maybe the person who wrote a book on marriage, who struggled the most in their marriage, their book gets read more than the person who has an idyllic marriage, because the crowd assumes that, oh, you can't relate to me. So you have to find, and this is a way that even your dark places, your dysfunctions, your broken places can be powerful tools used in the conveying of your story. Listen, tell me one good story that you've ever read, watched, or experienced that did not have a negative point in there. There's always got to be conflict. There's always got to be even watching a Hallmark Channel, I can tell you where it happens. At about an hour and 47 minutes, the old boyfriend's going to show up, or something's going to happen that goes wrong. It just happens because conflict is a part of life, and it's a part of every story. And if you have no conflict, you don't have a full story. So these things all help you beat skepticism. How do you defeat inertia? Well, one of the most important things is creating what I would call a strong call to action. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But what can you do that gives people a reason to act now? What can you do that moves them from that place where it's easier to, I might be you completely believing everything you have to say, but you still have to not just get me to believe what you have to say, you have to get me to do something about it. And so what can you do to create inertia? So sometimes the tactical, practical things of offering a limited time offer or some kind of a bonus or a time frame. I mean, Mark makes sure that if you don't register by 5 p.m., and I know this because I went online at 5:30 and I couldn't register for the lunch anymore. You have to meet the deadline if you want to take advantage of the preferred rate. And so think in terms of do you have a clear call to action? Because that can motivate people to move. The other thing I want to encourage you to do is ask yourself, what am I doing to make my audience hungry? In a perfect setting, right about now, I'd bring out a bag of microwave popcorn. And if I open that bag of microwave popcorn, even though I physically don't have it in my hand, in your mind, you know exactly where I'm going. Because as soon as I open that bag of microwave popcorn, what do? You smell it. You hear me and watch me eating it. And even if you're not a fan of popcorn, and this isn't the time of day when you'd have popcorn, if you watch me eating that microwave popcorn, what does it do? It makes you hungry. So what can you do? What can you say in your presentation, in your marketing, that will make people hungry? When you make them hungry, you have a better chance of getting over that inertia hurdle that will cause them to respond. And the last thing is what we talked about just a little bit earlier, and that is creating that sense of urgency, the doing it now. I have authors who oftentimes want to get a publicist to help them get on radio and television, and that's great. But I'm usually very clear to say, don't count on publicity necessarily selling a lot of books, because you might be a great interview on the radio, and the person interviewing you says, this is engaging and great call-ins, and there's a lot of interaction with the audience. But that doesn't translate into selling books, because people in the moment are enjoying the conversation, but have you given them enough reason to put the phone down, turn the radio off, go over to their phone, go online to text or call or interact with you? That's a harder thing to do, is to move them to action. But to the extent that you can create that urgency, which is why most infomercials say if you act now or for the first 100 callers, why are they doing that? All they're trying to do is create a sense of urgency. Does that make sense? All right, so those are 4 ways to deal with it, actually the fourth way is to beat desensitization. Desensitization. Don't ask me to say that 3 times. Number 1 is appeal to their emotions. Emotions sell. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But it's the limbic side of your brain, the portion of your brain where emotion rests. That's where decision making also happens. And so to the extent that you can create emotion, we talked about earlier about getting goosebumps when you share your story. You're creating emotion, but emotion sells. Ask any person in sales and they'll tell you that. So, and then the second thing is, what can you do to stand out? Seth Godin, a master marketer, wrote a best-selling book years ago called The Purple Cow. And his point was, is you could be driving down the highway on your way to vacation and pass farm fields of cows, and they're unremarkable. They don't stand out, and you won't remember them. Till, of course, you see a purple cow. All of a sudden, that would stand out in your mind. So what can you do to stand out, to differentiate yourself? What is it that you can share that's your purple cow? I contend that one of the things is your story, because there's some uniqueness to your story that nobody else has. I remember early on in my marketing career, I was writing marketing copy for the magazine that I was working for, and my boss called me in and read the copy, and I thought I'd written this brilliant stuff, talked about the value of the magazine, and he said, but if I can say this exact same thing about 3 other magazines, then you haven't had me. What can you say that only applies to us? And that really stuck with me, because especially in marketing, we get glib. We get used to sharing certain things and certain processes, and it sounds good and it's even true. But if it can be said about your competition as well, how is that going to differentiate you and cause you to stand out? The second thing is find a hook. I'm a musician. I love to write music. And one of the keys to having a best-selling song is to have something in the song that musicians call the hook. It's a line, it's a phrase, it's maybe a musical interlude or something that grabs attention, that's repeatable, that sort of just sticks in your brain. So where is the marketing hook that you could come up with? I actually have a couple of songs running in my brain, but I'm going to resist the temptation and spare you me singing it for you. So, bottom line is let me summarize these things with 7 core principles. Number 1 is keep it simple, silly. I won't say stupid because you're not stupid, but you've got to keep it simple. So let me ask you this. If I said, here, I want you to get motivated, go out there and compete as hard as you can, don't stall, don't procrastinate, put in the needed effort. Gonna remember that? What if I said, just do it? Which company says, just do it? Why do you guys all know that? Everybody knows that's Nike. They took what they believe, what they want you to do, but they found a way to make it simple. Just do it. If I say, where's the beef? Who came up with that? Remember? Wendy's. That was years ago. I know I'm dating myself even just mentioning that. If I say, we have the meats. I have to say it like this. We have the meats. Who says that? Arby's. Exactly right. How about eat more chicken? Chick-fil-A. What if have it your way? Burger King. The point is, you see how all of these companies that have the budgets to spend big dollars in marketing and advertising have made part of their strategy to boil their core benefits down into something that's memorable, that's simple. Memorable and simple, which plays into part number 2, which is being memorable. The third thing is be sincere. Be sincere, be authentic, be vulnerable. We already talked about that a little bit, because people want to connect with people that they feel they can identify with. So being sincere is important. Number 4 is you've got to be emotional, because that's what's compelling. That's what moves people. Frankly, It's not just to be accurate. You might be the best at this, that, or the other, but how do you convey that in a way that stirs people on the inside? That's what we've got to do. And at the end of the day, is there enough value in it? I'm currently getting bids to have some home remodeling work done, and the services that I want might cost a certain amount of money, but if it's not worth it to me, it might be a good value, but if it's not valuable enough for me, I'm not going to spend the money. So what are you going to do that creates enough value that's worth the money for your audience? And then, of course, we already talked about being unique and being consistent and repeatable. These are important things. So what most small businesses and professionals and nonprofits overlook are these two keys to standing out from your competition: generating more leads, closing a higher percentage of the leads that you get, and retaining for your customers for longer periods of time. It's number one, telling your story, and number two, enhancing your brand. Now, in the telling of your story, I want to challenge you or encourage you to answer these 5 questions. I literally ask every author that we interview to publish to be able to answer these 5 questions, because I'm convinced that if they'll answer these 5 questions, it will help them develop a better book, whether or not they ever publish with us or not. But these same 5 questions apply in business. Number 1, why do you do what you do? Number 2, who is it that you want to serve? Number 3, how do you bring value to your customers? How are you going to make their life better? Number 4, what makes you different from your competition? What are you going to say that hasn't been said 100 times before? And number 5, where are you going to find your ideal clients? Where do they congregate? What watering holes do they hang out at? Because when you answer the why question, what you're really doing is you're dealing with your core values, you're sharing your story. And we'll talk in a minute about the ways that you can share your story. It has to do with your beliefs, your mission, your vision. Those things will not only inspire you, they'll actually connect you with and inspire your audience. So don't be afraid to share your why, which has to do with your values and your beliefs, your mission and your vision. These things will connect you, and they're an authentic part of your story. Your target audience, the people you want to serve, I get this all the time. I say, who's your ideal audience? I say, if I were going to fill Madison Square Gardens with people, whose butts would you want me to put in the seats? And most authors say, oh, I want everybody. You don't have enough money to market to everybody. So what you have to do is find out who are the most likely people, who will be your biggest cheerleaders. Those are your raving fans. And here's why. Because the people who are most passionate about your product or service, they'll be the ones that tell other people. Because at the end of the day, the more viral marketing you get, the more you get people sharing your story with their friends, the less you have to spend to prop that up. Do you remember the old Fabergé commercial? I think Heather Locklear did it, that said, I wash my hair with this and it makes my hair smell so good that I told 2 friends, and then they'll tell 2 friends, and they told 2 friends, and they tell 2 friends. I mean, multi-level marketing is built on this. And it's the whole concept of how can you, in today's vernacular, create viral media buzz. To the extent that you do that, you're actually going to have more impact, generate more leads, and spend less money doing it. Because really, anything you spend in marketing is really just money that you're spending to replace or to build up that word of mouth, authentic advertising that you're really looking for. That's really where the value is. And that comes from knowing not just everybody who will buy your book or your product or your service, but who are the most likely ones. When Target first started, they understood that their core audience were women who appreciated designer fashion but didn't want to pay designer prices. Now, I don't know about you, but I shop at Target, but I don't fit that core target audience at all. But they did a good enough job of appealing to their core audience first, that they told two friends and they tell two friends. And so their marketing broadened out because they started with a clear understanding of who they could serve the best, who would love them the most. So when you're a small business or a nonprofit and you're getting started, you want to be really clear about who are the people I can help the most, help them really well. I had an associate, an editor, who was a street performer at Epcot. And she'd say, you know, you could always tell the first time or the newbie performers from the seasoned ones, because the newbies would get out there and they'd start their presentation and maybe one or two people would stop and they'd kind of stall or they'd kind of wait until they could get a broader audience around them. The more experienced performers would really just pour into that one or two people who stopped, and they would just give everything they could to that one or two people that had stopped. And other people walking by would see how engaged those one or two people were, and then they'd stop. And then other people would see them stopping, and then they would stop. So by the end of the 15 or the 20-minute monologue, the seasoned performer would always have the bigger crowds. Why? Because they authentically served, blessed, entertained their core audience, and then let that bring them out to higher and higher ripples. So being very clear, being very aware of who your most likely audience would be is really important. That's the thing that will help distinguish you. And of course, being really clear about how you help them, what problem you're going to solve, is going to make a huge difference. And then, and what does your audience have in common? Where can you find them? So let's go back to that first thing. Simon Sinek wrote a book called Start With Why, where he made a compelling case for the fact that the most inspired communicators don't tell you what they do or even how they do it. They tell you why they do it. And the why sometimes is more compelling, it's more motivating than the what or the how. And the why has to do with your story. The why is your story. I can remember I was being picked up by someone. I was on my way to a speaking engagement. And in the car ride, I was asking him, what does he do? Well, what he does is he was a consultant for the plastics industry. So he helped companies purchase chemical processes whereby rosins are mixed to make different kinds of plastics. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm thinking to myself, nothing could be more boring. So I asked what I often ask. I said, so tell me your story. How'd you get into that? And so he began to share how he was a purchasing manager for a large company, and he began to realize that the large companies had an advantage over the smaller companies because they could invest in and negotiate and find the best practices, because the plastics industry, the rosin formulas, are not nearly as regulated as they are in other industries like the oil or the gas industries. And he said, you know what, I decided that wasn't right, and I really wanted to help out. I wanted to stick up for the little guy, so I formed my own company so that I could level the playing field. What he was doing, he was telling me his why. What he did didn't particularly grab me, but when he started to tell me why he got into that business, what motivated him to do it, the values that he had, I found, it's like all of a sudden I was thoroughly engaged in something, an issue that wasn't of natural interest to me. Why? Because he was telling me his why. I recently watched a video presentation. Two chiropractors had both produced really nice videos about their service. And the first video was a typical thing you would see. It was like, hi, I'm Dr. Dave Welde. I'm the head of this chiropractic clinic. And the camera panned and showed all the beautiful facilities. And the doctor was telling how great their services were and their board certification and how they were customer friendly. Said all the right things. It was a very well done video. Second video opens up with a scene taken from the stands of a high school football game. You can tell it's just raw sort of footage. And all of a sudden down on the field, there's a kid that's down on the field. and the trainers are running out. You can hear some gasps from the crowd. It's very rough, and you realize something's going on very seriously. And then a voiceover comes to say, 10 years ago, that young man on the field was me. I had been accepted into medical school. I was going to go off and I was going to become a plastic surgeon. But when I opened my eyes after that tackle and I saw the look of fear in the faces of the people staring down at me, and I realized I can't feel my legs, I knew my life was never going to be the same. I knew my life was over at that time. But over the next 6 to 8 weeks, the doctors at XYZ Clinic worked with me, and eventually feeling came back into my legs, and I got my life back. But I made the decision right then and there that I was going to commit my life to helping other people get their lives back. Hi, I'm Dr. David Welding. Now, the second video, pay attention in your own mind. Which one of those were you more engaged with? The first one, they were telling you all the right things, all the good values and features that they offer. The second one, they told a story. Stories connect us. People remember stories. And so, what is your story? What are the things that you can share that will connect you with your audience, that will make them love you? These are the things, the inspired communications that you can do. It makes those connections. Now, how do you tell your story? There's lots of ways you can do that. What does the About page on your website say? How compelling is that? Is it just words? Or are there videos? Are there photos? Do you take the time to actually tell your story, or you just give a resume of your qualifications? Big difference. So how can you use your About section of your website to tell your story? How can you share the stories of the people you've helped as part of your story? Rather than telling you all the things that we do, let me introduce you to Susie and let Susie tell you what we did for her. Do you see the difference? So sometimes it's your story, sometimes it's the stories of others. Why are blogs so important? Because it's a regular, whether you write one a week or one a month, it's a regular way for you to share stories or share aspects of your stories. I'm a big believer in publishing books, because when your competition is handing out flyers or refrigerator magnets, people don't throw away books. Even if they don't read them right away, they don't throw them away. So not only does a book authentically position you as a thought leader, it's a platform through which you can share your story. We're in hospice care. Well, there's several other hospice cares. So let me give you this book that shares the stories of how we take care of families. I guarantee you that differentiates you, that sets you apart, because the sharing of your story not only positions you as a thought leader, it builds those authentic connections with people, and that's what you want to do. That's what we call story marketing. You're using the power of your story to connect you. So that's your why. We talked about the who. Who are the raving fans? Who are the people who will love you the most? Who are the people who will most likely tell somebody else about you? Who has the greatest pain point that you can solve? I know you can probably help a lot of people. So my question is, who are the people who need you the most? Because the greater the relief that you have, the greater the loyalty and the passion they're going to have for you. Because the person who healed my cut doesn't garner as much passion as the person who saved my arm. Understand the difference? So who are these people? What are the things that they celebrate? What are the things that they protest? Where do they gather? What are their common interests? If you understand some of those things, that's going to enable you to connect with them in places that might catch them by surprise. So maybe you are an investor, you can advertise in investment vehicles or investment magazines, but maybe you find that a lot of your high-end investors, they love classic cars. So maybe you show up at Barrett Jackson's automobile auction and you do some things to connect with your investors around something else that they love even as much or more than investing. That's a way to distinguish or differentiate yourself. Here are some things that you can do to enhance your ability to connect with raving fans. Number one is be more relatable. Number two, share testimonies. Shareability. I was at a church service recently, and they had a theme called At the Movies. And they built sermons around popular movies, and it was a series that they did. But you know what? For each one of those movies that they featured, and they built the sermon around, I think the last one was Black Panther. Well, you know what? They rented costumes, and so they had the characters from the movies out in the foyer. And they had a photographer there who would take pictures. And so they had cast members running around. Well, guess what? Don't you think that all of the kids and frankly, the adults were all wanting to get their pictures taken with these characters? And what do you think they were doing? Posting them on their social media. So thousands of people were saying, here we are at this church, or here we are at this event. They created opportunities that made it easy for their audience to share with other people. That's what I mean by shareability. Another thing is, do me a favor. People love to know that you care what they think. So ask them to take a survey. Ask them to rate which of these book covers do you like the best. Or tell me which of these things. So when you do surveys or you question, when you ask somebody their opinion, you're creating an authentic connection with them. So how can you you're literally asking somebody would you help me sponsor this thing? Well, now that we've done this together, we have a shared experience, you've actually created a connection. So how can you build that into your marketing? Become a painter that creates pictures in the minds and the hearts of your people. What can you do to help them envision how their life could be better? If you're doing a weight loss program, you don't want to spend so much time telling me all the ways that you're going to lose weight. If you watch the infomercials, what they do is they spend all their time showing you how good you're going to look when you've lost the weight. Big difference. If you're selling a car, you don't want to spend all your time telling them about the soft Corinthian leather of these seats. What you want to spend your time doing is telling you you're going to feel like a queen or a king when you slide into the supple leather that hugs you and lets you know that you've arrived and that you're worth it. See the difference? You're painting a picture not of what you do for them, but how I'm going to feel, how my life is going to be better as a result of connecting with you. How good is it going to be to finally be the one that gets the stares at your reunion because you're the one that looks as good or better than you looked at high school? You're creating pictures in their mind of their desired future, not just how they're going to get there. Big difference. And then last but not least, how can you differentiate yourself? Listen, I'm in publishing. There's been hundreds of books written on the differences between men and women, haven't there? And yet when I talk about that subject, I'm pretty sure only one book jumps into your mind, which is John Gray's book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. Now, do you think he had anything to say that hadn't been said 100 times before? No, probably not. But the way he said it was memorable. How many semi-sappy, feel-good, motivational, inspirational, devotional books are out there? And yet, Mark Victor Hansen and Jack Canfield wrote a book called Chicken Soup for the Soul. If you think about it, that doesn't even make sense, except when I say chicken soup for the soul, everybody kind of gets that. You know what you're talking about. It's that warm, makes you feel good in your soul, like chicken soup would make you feel good if you had a cold kind of thing. The packaging and the presentation of it, it wasn't what they said that was necessarily as revelatory, but the way they said it. So in sharing your story, in cultivating and building your brand, how can you share in such a way that causes you to stand out and make a difference? So I'm going to move quickly through this last section because I want to be sensitive to your time. But here's the thing. Authentically answering those 5 key questions will help you in building your brand. I'm a big believer in brand, and I want to tell you right up front that your brand is not your logo. Your brand is not your tagline. People think, oh, I love my brand, and they think of my website or my logo. All of those things are things that are done to help support, enhance, and cause people to remember your brand. But at the end of the day, your brand is a promise. The brand talks about how people will think and feel about themselves by identifying with you. I love this. The highest purpose of a brand is to affirm people for who they are and what they believe. I'm not a big fashion guy, and most of the time I'm wearing golf shirts. And I have a bunch of them, and most of them don't have any logos or names on them, but I have 1 or 2 that have this little red guy on a horse with a stick in his hand. Now, I don't know Ralph Lauren. I don't know anything about him. But somehow, when I put on that polo shirt, is it softer than all the rest of the shirts? Can't say that it is. But I feel just a little bit different when I'm wearing that polo shirt than I'm wearing the no-name brands. You know why? Branding did that. Let me share a picture with you. Let's say you're going in for a big presentation. You stop at Starbucks. You get your favorite skinny mocha latte and you put it in your Starbucks mug. And you're getting ready to walk into this boardroom around the table of which there'll be 12 people sitting. This is a big deal for you. This is a big presentation. Right before you walk through the double glass doors, I stop and freeze time. I take the Starbucks coffee out of your hand. I pour it in a 7-Eleven cup, put a lid back on it, put it back in your hand. Unfreeze time. Now you walk into that board meeting. Do you feel the same about yourself walking into the board meeting holding your 7-Eleven cup as you did when you were holding your Starbucks cup? If your answer is no, branding did that. Because you see, branding has to do with how customers feel about themselves by how they identify with your brand. And so I'm going to talk to you and we're just to give you some very brief overviews of the core elements of what it takes to create not just a brand, but a contagious brand. You see, a contagious brand is the kind of one that naturally grows without the need for strong advertising. And the particular style, in fact, Darden Restaurants did this a lot, of this kind of brand strategy was developed by Stan Richards, and it's where you get the 5 core elements of your brand on one sheet of paper, so that it's memorable and everybody can line up around it and everybody can identify with it. And so we're just going to quickly walk through the elements of this brand sheet, this brand one sheet that you're going to create. The first thing you're going to start with, the bullseye in the center, is your brand vision. Your brand vision, and then that speaks to the brand promise, that speaks to the brand personality, and then that speaks to your raving fan identity. The brand vision is really the thing that inspires your team. It's what motivates them. It's what gets them excited about getting up in the morning. It's what directs future growth. It's the thing that gives you, you can literally make buying decisions about this. So for example, let me give you an example. Disney's brand vision is this, simple: keeping alive the magic of childhood. So when you think about the things that they do, the theme parks, the restaurants, the things that they own, all of those things are authentically helping them fulfill their brand. Now let's say they had an opportunity to buy a tool and die company, and maybe that would be a very profitable venture. I suspect they'll stay away from it because even though it's profitable, it doesn't line up with, it doesn't fall under the umbrella of their brand. Because if you start having to do things that get you out from underneath the core brand value that your brand vision, that's harder to sustain and to support. So the more authentically you can say, are these things that we're going to do, are these decisions we're going to make, are they going to help support our brand vision? Joe Gibbs Racing, one of the most successful racing teams, his brand vision is very simple: make the car go faster. So you see, the brand vision doesn't have to be complicated, and it needs to be artful and clear, but it will guide decisions. Now, the brand promise actually has three parts. It talks about your target audience, it talks about what category of business that you're in, and what is the most compelling benefit that you feel. I'll share it with you very quickly. So your target audience is, again, your raving fans. So let's say we take Hummer. Hummer would define their target audience as affluent men seeking unique expressions as a means of self-expression, unique experiences. Affluent men seeking unique experiences as a means of self-expression. Chick-fil-A, you know what their target audience is? Choosy people in a hurry. Notice they didn't say anything about people who love chicken. But their brand says that the kind of people we're going after are people who are choosy, they're discerning, they want quality, and they're in a hurry. It's that simple. So what category of business are you in? What's your blue ocean, the place that you want to own? For example, Hummer might say that, are they a car or are they a truck? They say, no. We're an all-terrain vehicle. They want to specifically be identified as something distinct. If you're Sub-Zero refrigeration systems, do you want to just be called a refrigerator? If you're selling a $10,000 refrigeration system, you don't want to be compared to a $900 refrigerator that you buy at Sears. So they want to position themselves. We're not just a refrigerator, we're into refrigeration systems. They're trying to define themselves in a way that enhances their brand. And then the third aspect of that is, what's the most compelling benefit, the thing that you do better than anybody else? So for example, with it's Hummer, it's like we can go anywhere that nobody else can go. So when you put all three of those things together, Hummer then ends up with a statement that says, to affluent men seeking unique experiences as a means of self-expression, Hummer is the all-terrain vehicle that goes where no one else can go. No other vehicle can go. Do you see how the positioning statement defines your target audience, the kind of business that you're in, and your most compelling benefit into a simple statement that all flows together? The exercise of going through this with your leadership team will help you pull together and clarify who you are, who you want to serve, and how you help them the most. That's really answering that brand positioning statement. And then once you do that, then you can ask yourself, does our website enhance or hurt that brand? Do our flyers or our mailers, does our business card, does our logo, does our exhibit, do our presentations, do our personnel enhance or hurt that brand? This is where the power of branding comes in, is when you put all of these things together. Now, the brand personality is just taking a little bit more time to come up with adjectives that identify your audience and what they're about. Keep in mind, it's not about what you're like. It's what is your raving fans like. With Hummer, it says that they're sophisticated, they're rugged, they're powerful, they're irreverent. So it's just coming up with some adjectives, some identifiers that help you understand the kind of person that you're looking for. And then the raving fan identity is simply answering the question, what do my clients say about themselves? Not what they say about you. What do they say about themselves? What makes them excited and proud? The more you understand that, the more your brand will have that compelling connection with your audience. Because at the end of the day, it's about connections. One of the ways that you stand out, one of the ways that you generate more leads, one of the ways that you retain and close more of the leads that you have, is that you connect with people. That's really what we're talking about through the power of story and branding, is making authentic connections, because we're humans. Humans were made for connections. And so when you can appeal to that instinctive built-in wiring of humans by making authentic connections, you're going to be successful. Let us help you do that today. I hope you've enjoyed this free webinar on how you can unleash the power of story and build your brand in order to reach and connect with the audience you most want to serve. So now let me ask you, what's your next step? Ultimately, I want to take the information that we just went over together and expand it and build it out into a thorough, thoughtful online course. But in the meantime, let me suggest this. Let's have a conversation. Grab a cup of coffee, because I want to hear specifically about your ministry, your organization, your business. And from there, we can tailor the right application for how you can best share your story to build your brand and connect with your audience. For some, it might be magazine articles. It might be a book. It might be an online course. It might be a series of blogs or a webinar or a documentary. I don't know. Every organization is different. My goal is not to just sell you a program, but to listen and to hear about your organization, your unique challenges, and then let's work together to craft a story marketing strategy that will connect you with the people you most want to help and serve. At the end of the day, that's my goal, is to help you experience the thrill of making a difference.